Hi everyone. For this video we're going to be looking at all the different variations of Luke Skywalker's lightsaber hilt from Return of the Jedi. I'm going to try my best to answer the question that comes up all the time on on Facebook groups and other places. I've had people actually message me to say what's going on, which one is the real one, which one is the accurate one, which one is the official one. There isn't really an easy answer, but I'll try to keep it as simple as possible. All four of these are Luke Skywalker's Return of Jedi lightsaber, and as you can see, there are differences in their appearance. Most people would automatically think of this one. This is commonly accepted as the hero version, or the official version of Luke Skywalker's lightsaber. And the reason for that is because most of the toys and replicas since the 90s pretty much are based on this appearance. But ironically, this hilt was barely present in the film at all. If you go back and watch it, you'll only really see it in one scene when Vader's turning it over in his hands and he speaks the line, "I see you have constructed a new lightsaber." It's this one. The other scene is actually a deleted scene, and you'll only find it on the Blu-ray, on the extras as one of the deleted scenes, or on Disney Plus. And it's a scene where Luke Skywalker is on Tatooine in the early part of the movie, and he's constructing his lightsaber in the cave. And those are the only two scenes where this variation of the lightsaber is seen. Every other part of the movie is one of these three. So it's kind of ironic that the one that most people would associate or assume is sort of the real one is the one that's seen least in the actual film itself. And there are reasons for that, which I will explain. So the first one I think we're going to talk about is the V2. This is the one that a lot of people, including myself, would consider to be the real, actual hero. The reason for that is that anytime that Luke is seen with a lightsaber hanging on his belt, it's actually this one. And this hilt is seen in like 90% of the movie. Some examples are, as I said, when it's hanging on his belt, almost every single time it's this one. What other? When R2 shoots it up from his dome, it's not this one, but when Luke catches it, it is this one. What else? Later on in Endor, when he turns it on to cut the speeder bike down, when he's arrested when he surrenders to the officers on the Death Star, on Endor, and he's taken to Vader. The officer has this in his hand and he gives it to Vader. So then Vader has it in his hand the entire time he's talking to Luke. It's only literally when it cuts away and he says, "I see you have constructed a new lightsaber," then he's turning this one in his hand. And if you watch carefully, it's that one when he speaks, and then it will cut back, right back to this one again. This is also the saber that Vader will hand the Emperor and says, his lightsaber. Emperor says, "Oh yes, a Jedi's weapon," etc. He'll take it and go to his throne and put it right next to him, taunting Luke, "I see you want this." All of that is this V2. So yeah, the V2 is present throughout most of the film. So why was this created in the first place? So what happened was, during filming, when they started to shoot, obviously Luke has lost his Graflex on Cloud City in The Empire Strikes Back, so he needed something new. And according to what I've read or what I understood, I think they probably just missed that fact altogether when they started filming. Then they realized it pretty late on, so he couldn't have a Graflex. So what they did is they recruited one of Obi-Wan's Stunt Sabers from A New Hope. So this is obviously Obi-Wan's normal saber from A New Hope. This is what he had on his belt. This is the hero prop that everyone knows, Obi-Wan A New Hope. Well, there are two stunt sabers that look similar to it, but they're primarily used for dueling and things like that, for rehearsals. So they're much harder to spot on screen because they're not the like official hero ones. So there were two of those. One of them had like a motor, had some buttons here and switches that he could turn it on, and this whole emitter would spin and give the illusion, or not the illusion, give that appearance of the blade kind of flickering and shimmering. So that was called a motorized stunt. Now that was the saber that was then kind of rehashed to become the V2. Literally, this would have looked, before all this paint, it would have looked like, it would have been Obi-Wan's stunt saber in A New Hope. And all they did was, for the spinning emitters, they put on some gaffer tape to secure it. They put on it already had this graphics clamp with this long lever. They threw on some sort of clamp card. It's got the missing sidebar there. And then they plugged the holes. There's two holes here for like a switch, and some wires would have come out of this one. They just put on this like boot stud and cone knob, and they might have thrown on a D-ring. I'm not too sure about that. But it's definitely the Obi-Wan A New Hope stunt saber. And that's how the V2 was born, essentially. And as I said, this would become Luke's main belt hanger throughout Return of the Jedi and most of like the medium shots and close-ups. So they've done the V2, and now Luke needs something with a blade, doesn't he? He needs something to duel with Vader at the end of the movie, and also for rehearsals and stuff like that. So again, going back to Obi-Wan in A New Hope, as I said, he had two stunt sabers. The primary one was reused for the V2. The secondary one, like a backup one, was used to create the V3. And what they try to do, I guess, is as much as possible is to kind of look similar to it. But you can see there are definitely differences. So, and this is the reason it looks much more different now. I'll explain that to you. It didn't look like that during filming. It didn't look so, copper over here. It looked much more worn and much more similar to the V2 during the actual production. But it is different. You can see the seam because it's cast. It's got a Graflex clamp with a regular lever. This card was added later on because after the movie they wanted it to look like that one, but during the movie they wanted it to look like this one. So during the movie, I think it had a clamp card similar to that. I've just based mine on the like the final look of it. During filming, it was much more sort of blackish and tarnished everywhere. A lot of these things, like all the foil tape here, all were additions after the movie was done and wrapped, because they wanted it to look like the other version, because this went on tours and exhibitions and events and things like that. So I think they really cleaned it up to try to make it look like the hero. But during filming, as I said, the V3 looked a lot more like the V2. So this saber was the belt hanger, the V2. V3 was the bladed stunt, and you can only really see this in the duel scene at the end with Darth Vader. If you pause it and look closely, sometimes you can notice that it will be harder to notice though, because I said it looks so similar to that one. It won't look anything like this. But you can see some differences, certainly on the neck. And then when I think the easiest scene to see is when he turns it off at the end, after he cuts off his hand and throws it away and says, never, I am a Jedi like my father before me. So you can clearly see it there rather than anywhere else. So yeah, those were really the two main sabers in the film, V2 and V3. Now, what they also had to do is they made copies of this one. They took this one and they made like several resin and metal copies of it because in certain scenes it was not practical for Luke to be like jumping around with this on his belt. So when he jumps on the sail barge, it's a resin copy. It's resin or rubber. It's got to be soft. The one that shoots out of R2, as I said before, Luke catches that one, but the one that shoots out of R2 is a copy, again, a resin copy of that one. I don't have any of those resin or whatever copies, but they're all based on this, so they look very similar. Now, one of those copies was actually taken, and it was a metal copy this time, not a resin copy. It was taken and they added a shorter blade to it. I have the short blade actually, I'll just bring it over. This is the short blade. This is literally how short it was. So this is clearly not for dueling, but this is so that Luke can like cut down the henchmen on the in the sail barge scene. He can like strike them and deflect blasters and stuff like that. So this was good enough. So they needed like a short bladed stunt. So again, they took the V3, made some copies of it, metal and rubber, or resin, whatever. The soft rubbery ones were like used for like jumping around and firing out of R2. One of the metal ones was used with a short blade for Jabba's henchman, and that was called the Yuma. So literally this was a copy of that one. And again, they tried to emulate it. They tried to make it look similar. As you can see, it's similar enough at a distance. And it was created to look similar to it. And as you can see, the paint job is really different. So that will give you a clue to how that looked during filming. It's probably more like that. Much darker and all kind of scratched up. And then when they machined it, they didn't put a graphics clamp on. This is all one solid piece. They just machined on like a false control box with like a dummy lever here. This isn't a lever, it's just like a dummy machine thing that looks almost like a graphics lever. And that was the only purpose of this, and it was the first one with a triangular D-ring. So yeah, this was like an exaggerated copy of the V2 at the time. And where you can see this, as I said, in Luke fighting off the henchman on the sail barge. Also, there's that promotional poster of Luke with his lightsaber held up. That's the Yuma. And that's it. You don't see it later on in the movie. So yeah, another stunt saber. So stunt, hero, and finally the actual hero. So, after filming, when everything had wrapped up and completed production, they went back and they saw that Vader says, "I see you have constructed a new lightsaber." And they wanted to insert a shot with like a close-up to him turning the saber in his hand. Well, if he had said that while looking at this thing is so beat up looking. There's nothing about it that looks new. It just doesn't make sense. So that's the theory, is that the theory that they needed something that looks a bit cleaner and newer. So what they did is they took this bad boy, the Yuma, they cleaned it up and they painted it, and they removed this box here because that's just held by a couple of screws. They took that off and they machined and designed a new fancy control box. And this was born. And the evidence to that, I will show you. If you look at the rings of the grenade section, you can see that they are a perfect match. Some of them are fat, some of them are thin. So it is the same saber. The size, the dimensions of the necks of the emitters, everything is a perfect match. So this was this. It was just repainted and cleaned up. The only addition is the control box. So they gave it a new one with these rails and a copper and the green and red LEDs and new like buttons. And that's the one that was used for that shot and also for the deleted cave scene. It's slightly different between the two scenes, but it is the same saber. In the earlier one, where with Vader has it in his hand, I think the rails here are not as like prominent. They're sort of more flush. It looks more like a box. So I think they added another like layer to it later on in the cave scene so that he can like slide that up or down. I don't remember how it goes. Yeah, he slides it up to reveal this circuit inside. So that was probably a later modification. So the I see you have constructed new lightsaber scene did not have all this, but it looked like that, like this. It had the rails, the gold on the sides, the buttons. I don't know about these, but it was a bit more flush, but it was the exact same saber. And this, as I said, the predecessor was the Yuma. And you can literally see how similar they are. The location of the tri-ring is a perfect match. The grenade, the emitters, all of it. So this used to be Yuma, or the Hero, or the V1 sometimes called. Used to be the Yuma. The Yuma is a metal copy of the V3, and the V3 was the stunt of the V2. And that is it. I know it's a lot to take in. It can be a little bit complicated to understand, but you know, hopefully it was interesting. Hopefully you've learned something from it. We all have our favorites. A lot of people love the V2 because it's the one that we see the most. A lot of people love the Hero because, you know, all their toys and everything, their first Luke Return of the Jedi is going to be probably that one. A lot of people actually prefer these ones because they're so kind of beat up and quirky looking. So, you know, we all have our favorites. I obviously love them all. Return of the Jedi is my favorite movie. Luke is my favorite character, so it made sense for me to collect all four. Yeah, any questions, feel free to leave a comment. If I've made any mistakes, I apologize. I'm certainly no expert, but that's as far as I know. I think everything I've said, I think, is correct. And I got most of this information from either the Facebook groups, talking to friends, or from Wanawanga, which is a fantastic resource. There's a lightsaber guidebook, which I will link in the description below. But yeah, feel free to leave any comments, and I will see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.